So the first thing my investors, clients will look into a biotech company, especially a startup company, is the foundational technology. Where did it come from? The source of that technology, and also the source of the original funding. For example, a lot of the foundational technologies came from a university, right? And then had some NIH or NSF funding. So the investors will look at the grant agreement between the company and the NIH or NSF to see if there is any strings attached. Almost all the time, if there is a change of control, you may need consent from the government or the consent from the original university that licensed the technology to the company. So foundational technology is very important. So if you are on the company side, make sure you have a good understanding of the source of your technology and the source of the funding, so you can articulate the answers and help the investors understand that question very well. That will help you establish investor comfort early on. Second thing I want to talk about is IP, intellectual property. That's obviously very important for investors looking into biotech investments. So we usually do two types of IP due diligence. Well, there are two types of IPs, right? The owned IP and the licensed IP. For the owned IPs, we usually would do at least a chain of title type of due diligence to make sure that we, Dorsey and Whitney, can tell our client that, yeah, the company does own its IP. That's the chain of title. But that is a kind of a very shallow, superficial level of IP due diligence. Oftentimes nowadays, clients will also ask us to do a deeper dive to look into the validity of the IP, validity of the patents. You probably know that generic drug makers these days are making a big push to challenge drug patents. The third thing our investors always look into is, export control related issues. And that's more and more important nowadays, especially if an investor is an international investor or if the investor has LPs, foreign LPs in their GPLP structure. What's considered export is not what you think of, the day-to-day export. It doesn't require any transfer of goods or service across the border. A licensing can be deemed export. So for an investor to understand the commercial value and the future commercialization potential of a biotech company and their products, they usually will look into export control, impact on licensing, and future international funding. Capital structure, that's always important no matter whether you invest in biotech or any other company. Capital structure, not only the equity shares, but also the convertibles and derivatives, such as options, warrants, restricted shares, and other types of security interest that can be converted into equity shares. And related to the capital structure is the shareholder relationship of that biotech company. What we have seen again and again is the kind of shareholder disputes among biotech founders. Because oftentimes biotech founders are friends. They went to the same postdoc program for years and they started the same company after being colleagues for many years. So at the beginning, they usually did not have that corporate housekeeping to have the right board resolution, the infrastructure to properly issue the shares and to govern the shareholder relationship. And then once the company becomes bigger and more successful, it's harder to go back and fix the problem that you didn't have when you started a brand new company. For later stage biotech companies, our investor clients care a lot about the material contracts. So for example, in licensing and out-licensing agreements, distribution agreements, CRO type of arrangements, and any commercialization and development agreements a later stage biotech company might have. And one last point, I want to echo what Rose Wang said earlier. We also look into the person, the main inventor or the key person who's behind the company. Sometimes a key person or the main inventor can be a professor or a scientist from a university or a research lab. These days, university research integrity offices and NIH and NSF, they look very, very carefully at professors' disclosures, your annual conflicts of interest report, your annual disclosures, right? So these paperwork is important. Our investor clients care about these because they don't want to invest in a company only to find out later that the key person is under some sort of internal or NIH investigation. That can be very, very distracting.